Thank you very much, Hima and P, for those really, really kind words. I really, really do value your support and the support from the rest of the community. Before I start, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Kavi, the head of AI instructor, for providing me with the opportunity to do this talk. And without further ado, I'm going to start my presentation. Can everyone see? Okay. The title of this presentation is Succeeding as a Student. And for me, the kind of motivation, the motivation behind doing this was over the recent lockdown period, I've really contemplated over, the different tips and tricks that I've applied, the things that I've learned over, my past 7, 8 years as a secondary school student and now a university student that have really benefited me in terms of really being productive and efficient in my work and really allowing me to excel. And I've also kind of started to think about things that, in hindsight might have been even better, things that I could have applied that would have even boosted me even further that I'm now looking to apply. And this is something that, both me and my friends have really thought about. And I think it'd be really useful, for the upcoming generation, for the kids listening to this, to listen to and try to implement into your own lives. Now, as a quick precursor, I'm going to be talking about two different types of things. So the first sort of set of things are technical skills. And these are things that you can really add to your CV that will boost your CV and make you look more employable and will boost your productivity. And there are also mindset changes to make you more productive and more efficient with your work and hopefully make you a more hardworking and well-rounded student. So the first topic that I'd like to cover, that I think is really, really important, is touch typing and basic computing proficiency. And these two are sort of the more technical aspects that look really, really good on your CV, but also will benefit you throughout your school career, whether that's year 7 or year 13. Touch typing and computing really do come in handy. So for those of you who don't know, touch typing is the ability to type without looking down at the keyboard. It means that your eyes can be glued to the screen in front of you and you can just be typing away. And this really does increase your typing speed significantly. You can go from, if you look at the keyboard, your typing speed will probably be around 25, 30 words per minute at max. If you learn to touch type, you can go up to 60, 70, and even 80 words per minute. And this really does boost your productivity because it means that you can do a task that would take 20, 25, 30 minutes for other people. You can do it in 5 or 10 minutes tops. And I found that it's really, really useful for note taking and for producing pieces of work. So two examples of that, during my school career was I'd be doing French coursework where I'd have to write down, have to produce written work in French, and people would take 20, it would take up to an hour to do these things for other people. Whereas I'd learned to touch type. I'd learned also the keyboard shortcuts for the different accents and symbols. And by doing that, you can quicken things up. And I was done within 5 to 10 minutes. And I could spend the rest of that 50-minute lesson working on other things, revising. So in essence, by learning to touch type, you're left with more time to work on other things that, that will also boost your productivity and your overall output. So that's touch typing covered. And now on to basic computing proficiency. By that, I mean things like learning how to use Word, use Excel, use PowerPoint really, really well, knowing all the ins and outs of the software, knowing all the different shortcuts, all the different tools that these software offers. And by doing that, you can, in essence, most of your work during school, whether that's year 7 or year 13, is going to be done either written, but when you are using a computer, it'll be done on Word, PowerPoint, or Excel. So by having a really in-depth knowledge of those 3 things and maybe a couple of other things depending on your speciality, you can produce really, really high quality content fairly quickly. The next thing I want to touch on is learning a language. Now, growing up, I speak English and Tamil is my mother tongue, but I also did German and got an A star at it at GCSE. I did French and got an A star at it up to A level. And then more recently over lockdown, I've been learning to speak Hindi. And I found learning new languages really, really invaluable from a social aspect, but as well as from a kind of career CV aspect. Learning Tamil, my mother tongue, has really helped me to connect with my family, whether that be my family, my close family or my family back home in India, but also, wider society, the local community, wherever that be, whether I'm in Leicester or London or wherever you are. I think learning your mother tongue, and any other language for that matter, is really, really invaluable. Because it really does increase your capacity to socialize and make really, really useful bonds with people that you may not have otherwise. Knowing to speak a language is also an incredibly useful work skill. It's something that employers are really, really looking into and prioritizing now. In fact, I'm currently applying for a couple of internships at some big investment banks. And a lot of them have listed, having a second language or being fluent in a second language is highly, highly desirable. And I've also seen statistics saying that you're up to 40 or 50% more likely to be employed if you know a language such as French or German up to GCSE or A level level. So I'd really recommend learning a language, and it's also very, very fun. It's an addictive thing to do. And I've noticed that learning new languages, you start thinking in different ways. You get immersed into a different culture and a different way of thinking, because every language has its own different structure, its own grammar, its own vocabulary and phrasing. And understanding where that comes from, and you start to see the connections between things is honestly quite mind-blowing. In terms of languages that I'd recommend learning, French, German, Spanish are always very, very popular ones, in addition to English. I'd say the East Asian languages are also growing in popularity, so Mandarin and Japanese. But at the end of the day, learn a language that you really like. Now, moving on to a more CV-oriented thing is getting work experience and volunteering. Now, so some of the younger members in the audience, if you're in year 7, year 8, you might be looking at me and saying, oh, is it not too early for work experience? And I personally say no. I think even if you don't know what industry or sector you want to get into, work experience helps you to narrow it down. For example, I did work experience in rugby, over the summer holidays at General Electric, which is an engineering firm. And obviously that has nothing to do with the economics or finance degree that I'm pursuing right now. But, going to G, I learned something, and you always do learn something regardless of where your work experience is. So for me, despite it being an engineering firm, I learned things about how the company was reducing its costs, being more cost efficient, some of the new innovation coming in. And that's something that, you can apply to economics. Economics is about efficiency and allocation of resources. So work experience really does help you to decide on a career path, because it eliminates certain of them, and it really highlights the ones that you think you might enjoy in the future, and you can kind of target those paths. And it also looks really great on your CV. It shows to employers that, you've been focused on that industry, or you've really wanted to gain exposure from a really young age. And so it shows to them that you're a really committed and motivated individual. A piece of advice I'd give is to apply to work experiences at programs at really reputed firms. So I've listed a couple of large investment banks that I know offer pre-university work experience programs. So that's JP Morgan, HSBC, Morgan Stanley, Nomura. And if you are going to apply to those, apply early and do take your time on each and every application. In addition to work experience, volunteering is also really, really useful. It shows that you want to give back to the community, back to society, and again, that's something that that employers really look for. But it's a really, really nice, enjoyable feeling knowing that you are giving back. And volunteering is especially useful if you aspire to get into medicine or any sort of social work or any that sort of field. Again, another bit of advice for you is for work experience and volunteering is to sign up for an organization called SEO. SEO provides dedicated kind of work experience programs, application advice for minority ethnic people or people of color. And it's really, really valuable. They provide cover letter advice, CV advice, assessment center advice. They provide kind of bespoke programs that only SEO members can apply to, and all these other different opportunities. So I'd really recommend applying to and signing up for SEO. And then finally for this slide, I'd recommend that you start, there's never really too young of an age to start networking. You never know when people will, the people that you meet will really come in handy in terms of furthering your career. So it could just be, an odd person you meet here or there that could blossom into something a lot bigger. So yes, I would recommend networking, especially if you're going into your GCSEs or if you're in the sixth form years of your life, then networking is really, really useful. Now here is just a list of all the opportunities that are available in terms of economics or finance during the sixth form, whether these are like essay competitions or actual work experience programs. Both of them are really, really useful. And I will just a little note though is that some of these are only open to women or people of people of color, because these are insight programs, but nonetheless they're all very, very useful, and I recommend that you apply to some of these if you are in the sixth form. Another really, really useful thing that's benefited me and benefited a lot of people that I know is reading. Reading increases your vocabulary power and it exposes you to new forms and styles of writing. And that's the case both for fiction and non-fiction. So in fiction, it's more stylistic language, the different techniques that authors are using that you can eventually pick up and start trying to apply yourself. And that becomes really, really useful when you're doing, especially for the younger ones who are still taking English language up to GCSE. That's very, very useful because you can start applying those techniques and then getting better grades by being more sophisticated in your writing. Whereas non-fiction, you develop a better understanding of the world, so you boost your general knowledge. But at the same time, you become a lot more analytical, because if you're reading more fact-based writing or articles and that sort of thing, then you start to implement, or at least I started to implement that style of writing into my work. And so when it comes to writing essays, whether that's for economics or for English literature or anything like that, or history, that starts to seep in, that style, that analytical nature starts to really seep in. Now, some of you listening might say, oh, I don't have enough time to start reading, like I'm already occupied with so many other things. And I kind of get where you're coming from. I know youngsters these days have a lot going on. I really would encourage, to devote 30 minutes just to an hour a day, maybe before you go to bed, reading something. And if you really, really are struggling for time, then I'd recommend audiobooks as a really good alternative, even though they may not necessarily be as good as reading. Audiobooks, they allow you to consume knowledge whilst performing other tasks. So whether, you're on the school bus or you're doing some chores around the house, you can just pop your earphones in and listen to the book instead of reading. Two really good sites for that are BorrowBox and Audible. Just a little caveat though, on playing devil's advocate, you can argue that audiobooks, there's a chance that since you're not entirely focused on the book, you don't really absorb the full 100% amount of knowledge. So I recommend that they might be better for fiction books rather than more intensive analytical non-fiction books. And it is important to get a good variety of the two. I can't stress that enough. And another good alternative to books, I mean, it's not an alternative, but rather something in addition, are podcasts. And they're a great way to listen to really interesting discussions in a more relaxed, informal environment. I actually start every day listening to a bunch of podcasts. Some of my favorite ones, you know, as an economist or an aspiring economist, are the Financial Times News Briefing, The Economist Radio, The Wall Street Journal. But I also do listen to other things. There's a podcast called Splash, which is entirely in French, which I listen to just to improve my French skills. And I'd recommend that people, you know, just do some research, find the ones that they enjoy, and then keep listening to that, and you'll develop and improve your general knowledge. Leadership roles are something that I think is very useful to obtain when you're in the school. And that it doesn't matter whether you obtain them, you know, at school, you know, doing being a prefect or a sports captain or a head boy or head girl for that matter, or you can do it outside of school. I know there are things such as the Birmingham Temple Youth Camp or Christian camps where you can be a youth leader and things like that. And regardless of what your position is, having a leadership role, it does help to develop your interpersonal skills a lot, especially your and communication skills. It shows that you're willing and comfortable to take on a position of responsibility. And that's something that a lot of employers look out for. And it's something that firms specifically look for in your CV, especially if you're applying to very, very competitive industries such as investment banking or consulting. And even besides the CV kind of role, developing the teamwork and communication skills, it really does mature you as a person. It means that you can adapt to different environments. It puts you in a position of responsibility, and it forces you to become organized very, very quickly at a very young age. So as soon as a leadership kind of role becomes available that you might be interested in, I'd say to apply for it, go for it, put your whole heart into trying to get it, especially if it's something that you do think you will enjoy. Now, I know that there is something called NCS, which is kind of branded, publicized, marketed in such a way that it's made to look as if it's something that universities look out for, especially as if they have a tick box just for people who've done NCS. I don't think that's the case, and I've actually had very, very mixed, opinions about NCS from numerous friends. I myself didn't do it, but some people have said they loved it. Others said they really, really detested it. So I'd say do your research before applying to that, because it is marketed as, you know, developing your leadership experience and your leadership role. But there might be better positions out there for you that you could be spending your time on instead. On a similar note to leadership roles, get involved in extracurricular activities. School and university are the periods in life where you have by far the most free time. And so it's a really good idea, especially for younger students who haven't started their GCSEs or whatever the equivalent is, that is the people in year 7 to year 9. It's a really good idea for you guys especially to be proactive and join as many extracurricular programs as possible. Whether that's sports teams, music groups, or other societies. In fact, if you have decided what industry you want to get into, what degree you want to pursue, then joining societies that are directly relevant to those is very, very useful. For example, I know that there are societies called Model UN, which is supposed to replicate the United Nations. So if you are into being a diplomat or want to study international relations, then that's the one for you. Similarly, there's things such as Young Enterprise for the more entrepreneurial youngsters amongst us. And it doesn't matter whether you win or you're particularly talented. I think as long as you participate, it doesn't matter. As long as you participate and as long as you enjoy whatever you're doing, it doesn't really matter. I think getting involved in itself is a big thing. And you will pick up skills, whether that's, you know, socializing, your interpersonal skills, your soft skills. You will inevitably learn and hone in on things that you wouldn't have otherwise if you didn't join those extracurricular programs. So even if you realize, oh, I'm not all that great, I'm not the best person here, doesn't matter, just stay put and keep going to them, especially if you're enjoying them. However, that being said, if you do find that you are particularly good at a skill, what I would say is to try develop and excel and hone in on that skill, whether that is music, sports, photography, video creation, whatever it is. Really, really try and improve at that skill, and try become as good at it as possible. Maybe devote some extra time if you do realize that you have a particular talent. This will allow you to stand out from the crowd. And if it's something like video creation or photography, you may be able to eventually monetize, as in make money from your skill by offering it as a service, which is obviously useful from a financial perspective. You make some money on the side in addition to your education. I think something that's really, really underrated as a student is developing a healthy lifestyle. Forming a well-balanced diet and a solid exercise routine is really, really invaluable, and it's beneficial to both your mental and your physical health. It helps you to look and feel better. And I think it really, the effect of, working out or playing some sport, it really, really is noticeable after a hard day at school. And I think a lot of the time it's what kept me going. Lower down in the school, before the sixth form, I was playing basketball very, very regularly, at least 3 times a week, I'd say, for my club. And that kind of break from any kind of academic or career focused tasks, it really does help you to relax and unwind. And then it keeps you motivated. The break helps you to then work hard when you do go back into the kind of studying side of things. Time management and developing a good schedule is really, really invaluable for a student. I continue to stand by this, and it's something that I think fortunately I developed at a fairly young age. Going to rugby, and that hour or two that I'd lose in travel really made me have to prioritize time management. And one thing I'd really recommend is that whilst you're at school, I'd say to prepare early and get ahead. And this is a tactic that I employed throughout school, whether, year 7 all the way up to year 13. And I benefited from it throughout my entire time. So what I used to do was, I used to study my class subjects and get, 1 or 2 weeks ahead of the rest of the class. I'd read it at home, so that by the time the material was being covered in class, it was almost like a revision session for me. It was stuff I already knew, and it just reinforced my learning. And I know that a lot of people, when they're exposed to something for the first time, especially when you have a limited amount of time to study the subject and you're not taking it at your own pace, but in fact, you're taking it at the pace of your class, it becomes harder to absorb the knowledge. So if you prepare in advance and take it at your own pace, you're less stressed out, and you're just able to enjoy the class more because everything makes sense second time round, if that makes any sense. I'd also really avoid procrastinating. Set the deadlines and create a productive routine. Honestly, you can create a timetable of things you want to do once you get back from school, to make sure that you do adhere to the deadlines and that you get your work done. Don't leave things until the last minute, because all it will do is increase your stress, and it will lower the quality of your final product. So instead, start early and do it in really small chunks. And eventually over time, it will compound into a very high quality final product. And the entire time, because you've set yourself so much time to do it, you'll never get stressed that you won't finish it in time. Moving on to developing a productive mindset, which really goes hand in hand with the previous slide. So even when you are relaxing, I think it's good if you do try to learn new skills and concentrate on your personal development, and really push yourself to achieve as much as you can in any given period of time. For example, what I do is I watch movies in different languages. I watch things in French, I watch things in Hindi, because whilst I'm enjoying the language, I'm also picking up new vocab, new phrases that I can then implement when I'm speaking the language. And similarly, when I'm on YouTube, I'll try to watch, fun yet informative videos. And a couple of channels that I really recommend are Game or Film Theory, and Numberphile. So what Game and Film Theory do is they discuss, very, very kind of pop culture references. So Super Mario, Game of Thrones, but then they'll put an educational twist into it. So what is the physics behind Super Mario? Or how accurate is Game of Thrones to the real life Middle Ages? And things like that. And so you do learn, it enhances your general knowledge whilst at the same time it is relaxing. You're not actually doing any active work. However, that being said, make sure that you do take some time to just relax, unwind, and completely chill out with no regard for your career or academics. Just take like an hour or two whenever you need it. Just unwind and focus on things that you do enjoy, purely just for the sheer enjoyment of it. For those of you who really do want to get ahead of the rest and put yourself at a very big advantage and further your personal development and your understanding of topics, websites like Coursera, edX, and Inside Sherpa are really, really good. They provide free online courses, and the lecturers or whoever's teaching the course, they're normally from really prestigious universities such as Yale, MIT, Harvard, or from really large companies such as Citibank and the Boston Consulting Group. So if you do find yourself really, really interested in a specific topic, for example, I'm quite interested in financial markets and financial analysis of stocks and things. I enrolled onto a financial markets course that is taught by a Nobel Prize winning lecturer from Yale University. And so you get very, very, very good teaching for absolutely free, and you can obviously learn at your own pace. So there's no real pressure on you. You're just learning for the enjoyment of learning. And if you do find the course useful and you want to obtain a certificate of completion that you can put on your CV, you can put on your LinkedIn, for example, there's the option to pay to take a test. And in addition to online courses, look out for interesting webinars as well. Sign up for LinkedIn, especially if you're approaching your GCSEs and after. Sign up for LinkedIn. It gives you a head start from the rest of your peers. And you'll find that there are links to really interesting webinars out there that will help you develop an insight of companies or industries that the rest of your classmates or your year group won't have. And something that I think is really, really underlooked, and it's the penultimate slide of this. I'm saving the best for last, as it were, is household chores. And I think it's really, really easy as a student, especially if you're very, very devoted to your studies, to completely forget about household chores. I know this is, this was the case for me. I was so focused about, making sure that I got an A star, was revised as much as I possibly could, and was trying to further my career as much as I could. But I'd almost, you run the risk of disregarding, household chores and the practicalities of life. So even from a young age, year 7s, year 8s, listening to this, start helping around the house more. Learn to do the laundry, help out with the cooking, cook some basic meals, do the ironing, do the washing up. And it will save you a lot of pain when you move out for university, because all of a sudden, when you go to university and you haven't done this before, you now have to do it all for yourself. You don't have your mum or dad to really help you out. And so if you're used to doing all this stuff from a young age, it will help you adjust to university life and adult life a lot quicker. And it helps you to understand that how long you'll have to spend for tasks that you'll have to do as an adult. You'll get lucky as a child where your parents will might do it for you, but when you're in university, when you're becoming a young adult, you need to start doing these for yourself. And then finally, there's always going to be times where things don't go your way, things don't go as planned, and to that, it's really, really important to remember that failure really isn't final. You can't grow as a person, you can't develop as a person without making mistakes. You shouldn't even be afraid of making mistakes, because you need mistakes to learn and to grow as a person. Without them, you just be stagnant as an individual, and you wouldn't really develop. So in terms of once you've made a mistake, what's important is really to evaluate, analyze, the mistake, and identify the room for improvement, the areas where you can improve, and actively go out and look to improve those areas to make sure that they don't happen again. And ultimately, as you do that, you'll keep building on your mistakes, and you'll become a more well-rounded and more well-polished individual. And on a kind of separate note, for those people in year 12 and year 13 starting to think about university, thinking about their dream university, and if you do face rejection, if you do get rejected from your dream university, one thing that I really stand by is that it's not rejection as such, but it's more redirection. How I like to think about it is that it's not that it's the end of the world when you get rejected from your dream university or whatever, or your dream career even, or dream job. It's redirection. It's one path has closed up and another path has now opened up. And there is nothing to say that this new path that has come through, that has opened up to you, there's nothing to say that it won't be better than the previous path that you thought would be the best thing for you. For example, going into year 13, my dream university, my number one choice was to study economics and management at the University of Oxford. And I tried really, really hard. I prepared a month or two in advance of the entrance exam, did really well on the entrance exam, got to interviewed, had 3 different interviews at 2 different colleges, and got really, really close to getting in. But at the end of the day, I didn't. But looking back at it now, I think that I couldn't be happier studying economics in London at the London School of Economics. I think, in fact, it might have been the best thing to have happened to me. I've really enjoyed the London lifestyle and the way that the course is compared to the way the Oxford one is. So you never know. Just how things will move on or how things will develop in the future. So don't be disheartened now, because things will get better in the future, and they might be even better than what they otherwise would have been. And then when it comes to grades, if you don't get the grade you want in an exam, as long as you've tried your best, I think you have to be proud of what you've achieved. You've got to really think about, another thing that I really stand by is that the grades that you get on paper don't define you as an individual. You've got to think about how much you've learned, all the skills and techniques that you've learned by studying the subject, and ultimately how much knowledge you have of the subject. There are plenty of my friends, have been better than me at certain subjects over my school career, but they've not got as good grades as me after the final exam for one reason or the other. They panicked under one exam, they didn't perform on the day, they had a panic attack, things like that. But at the end of the day, they're just as knowledgeable as me, if not even more. So you really have to think about your own self-worth and just think about the knowledge that you have, and don't focus on the grade too much. And at the same time, don't compare yourself to others. Focus on how far you've come as an individual, how far you've developed. If you've grown as a person, that's what really matters. It's not whether he's got an A star and I've only got an A. Don't think about it like that. Just think about yourself. And then ultimately, there's always going to be times where you will feel disheartened, dejected, because something's not gone your way. And I think it's always natural that you're going to be upset for a little period of time. But it's really, really important to move forward with your life, and keep looking onto the things in the future, other opportunities that will come up. As I said, the new path that you're now taking, this new road that you're going on, and really trying to maximize and make the most of this new opportunity that's come up. I'm going to stress once more, failure really isn't final, guys. So that is the end of my presentation. And now I'm open to doing a Q&A. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Arvind. What less can I expect from an all-round personality? A very rounded and grounded presentation. So excellent presentation. Please encourage your children to ask questions to Arvind. I think that's the purpose of this talk. We've already got some questions on the chat. I'll take some questions and we'll see how that goes. So the first question is from Haja Dean. He's asking, it would help the audience if you tell them how you went about discovering economics, finance, or LSE, and how you chose it to be the right path for you.
Okay, so I think growing up in an Indian household, there was always a chance that I was going to do medicine or engineering. So I honestly had all my options quite open to begin with, which is why I did my work experience at GE, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do engineering. I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit of a squeamish individual. So I didn't think I was all that cut out for medicine. And, you know, my mother's a doctor, so I wasn't sure if it was the right lifestyle for me, all those, you know, on calls, those night shifts. I wasn't sure if I was quite cut out that way. You know, props to you, Ammar, if I know you're listening. But no, I quickly eliminated that as a path. And I'd always, in fact, I kind of almost discovered economics, but not by chance, but through growing interest. I knew that I was fairly entrepreneurial. I was quite into, you know, making money. I'd watched things like The Apprentice and what have you. So I thought a career I kind of always had an idea that, you know, a career in finance might be the one for me. But at the same time, I think you get a lot of exposure to economics just through the news and things like that. And I just really, really enjoyed the depth of it compared to, you know, studying something such as business, which is entirely oriented, you know, focused on just a company. Economics is a bit more wide-ranging in that you look at, you know, the individual, a company, and the economy. And if you want to, you can branch in. You can focus on businesses and the economics of a business, but you can also focus on a lot larger things like international cooperation and international relations and trade agreements and all those sorts of things. So I took business studies up until year 11, really enjoyed that. And then, and I did a couple of work experiences. I did work experience at an international trade finance firm called Synergy and Trade. I did work experience at the London Stock Exchange in year 11. And compared to my experience at GE, I really, really did enjoy both the stock exchange experience and the trade finance experience a lot more. So that really just reinforced the idea that I wanted to do economics. And so that's how I ended up pursuing it.
Oh, thank you, Arvind. If any of you want to ask questions, kindly unmute yourself and switch on your video. That'll be helpful.
So Arvind, thank you so much for that talk. And because you said you were learning Hindi, I'm going to say Dhanyavad. And then moving on to a question from the audience, Ashish has asked a couple of questions. So number one, did you have a group of like-minded friends to drive things forward in the last few years? And number two, in my experience, there are a few young people who are so organized and motivated. Usually it's an adversity, some deep hunger or very well motivated home setting that drives on. What are your thoughts, and how do we as a group create such, feed such hunger?
Okay, so the first question was about my friendship group. So yeah, I think I got very, very lucky. Even from from year 7, I quickly got a very, very academically minded set of friends. Who were very like-minded to me, and because of that, we always pushed each other to work very, very hard. And in fact, two of my 3 best friends at school took pretty much the same exact subjects as me the entire way through school. So we were always in the same lessons and always there to kind of spur each other on. Could you repeat the second question, please, Andy?
Yeah, sure, I will do. Give me a minute. So the second question from Ashish was, let me just go back. So in my experience, there are a few young people who are so organized and motivated. Usually it's an adversity, some deep hunger or very well motivated home setting that drives one on. So what is your thought on this, and how do we as a group create and feed such hunger? I
think it's a very kind of difficult question to answer quickly. I think being organized and I think there's always a good balance. Like you can't. I know there are some people who, if they're 15 minutes behind schedule, will start panicking, and I don't think that's the other way as well. I think you've got to have a degree of flexibility. The degree of flexibility in your life. If you don't achieve something on one day, it's okay. We'll do it the next, and really don't be too harsh on yourself. But at the same time, I think there are habits that parents can instill into their children. Really encourage them to develop some sense of organization from a fairly young age. By creating a timetable or whatever, is quite useful. Hold on, I've just yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Arvind. Does anyone else want to ask questions? Any of the children? I've got one here. Oh, Krish and Kiran have put their hands up.
Go on. Start with Pranav and then we'll join.
Yeah, Pranav wants to ask you something.
I can't hear him.
When did you?
I still can't hear you, Pranav. I'm sorry.
From the mute.
Can you hear me now, Arvind?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you.
He was asking, when did you start applying these tips and tricks in your life? He's just wondering whether he has a bit more time or does he have to start now?
I mean, it's it's not like a tick list thing where it's like, oh, you've got to do all of these like 10 or 11 or 12 whatever things I said immediately. I think it's a gradual transition. You gradually start implementing these things over time. I think the initial change is the hardest bit, and then it eventually becomes second nature. Pranav, you're going into year 8 now. So you don't have to worry too much about the CV related things. I think you're at an age where I'd really recommend you get involved in extracurriculars. I think getting ahead of the class is something that I'd recommend to you even now, and really start to have a little think about what career you want to pursue. But apart from that, and try to be productive, but it shouldn't be, it doesn't need to be the utmost priority in your mind right now. But I think you need to always keep it in the back of your head that you should start to try implement these sorts of things.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you so much. I think Krish and Kiran, they want to ask you something as well. Do you want to go on, boys?
Hi, Arvind. That was a very inspiring speech. My question is, how do you think parents can help to motivate their children to achieve their goals or dreams?
That's a very, very interesting question. I think providing encouragement, words of support, especially as I talked about in periods where you've quote unquote failed, or things haven't gone your way. Providing words of support to make sure that the kid remains motivated is something that's very, very good. And then a gentle nudge here or there is always kind of useful. Making sure that the kids that you're always on track. And I think something that my dad, because I'm not a parent, so I can't really say, but something that my dad did was really, especially when I was like in year 7, year 8, year 9, was making sure that I didn't procrastinate too much. So he'd always keep a check of how much time I was spending on the TV, how much time I was spending on the PlayStation. And if it was ever getting a bit too much for his liking, he'd put a word in and tell me to focus on something else, which I inevitably did. And, how many, 6 or 7 years later, I can say has benefited me. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Does any other hi?
That was a,
oh, sorry.
That was a very lovely. Hi, Arvind. That was a lovely speech. My question for you is, Who would you think of to help you push you on when you needed it most?
Who would I think to push me on when I needed it the most? Obviously, both my parents. Both my parents provided me with, I think they're very, very good at providing me with the support, I need at the right time. So things like, even, I've struggled with certain exams. I thought, I've been worried about certain things. It's inevitable as a student. But my parents have always been there to really reassure me, and comfort me when things are going wrong or I'm really stressed out about something. And both of my parents, they make sure that I'm in check. They make sure that I'm ahead of the class, or I'm keeping up with the classwork, I'm not falling behind. But also I think with the kind of friendship group that I ended up developing, we all did look out for us, for each other, and made sure that, if one of us was struggling, the others would come up and try prop them up and support them as much as they possibly could. So I can't emphasize or stress enough the value that your parents and your close friends, especially if they're, like-minded friends, very good friends, will have in your life.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a very interesting question in the chat. It's from somebody in India. Is from Shinesh Chidambaram Murali. He's currently in India, would love to come and do his higher studies here in UK.
Yeah.
And would like to know what are the things that I should prepare for before I get there, and what are the major changes I will face when I come there. By the way, I'm a commerce student, and great presentation, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much for the kind words. In terms of the application process, you've got to do, there's an entire kind of UCAS application process. So I can briefly walk you through that. You've got to do a personal statement, basically doing your stating your intent as to why you want to study a certain course. You apply to 5 universities. You want to get some teacher references. You fill out all your UCAS kind of details, and then depending on where, if you apply to Oxbridge, then you've got interviews. I can't really I mean, I never studied in India, so I can't really talk about how it is transitioning from an Indian education system to a UK one. In fact, I actually did a talk about that as part of the Rise 24. There's a recording on that, where I interviewed someone else. But I can tell you about how it is going from school to university. And the main jump is really the amount of freedom you have, and the fact that you have to take a lot more responsibility for your own actions. Unlike school, at university, everything's up to you. No teacher's really going to push you to do your work or to revise or make sure that you're on top of things. It's all down to you. So you've just got to take on that additional accountability and responsibility for yourself and manage your time even more wisely. Because again, it's completely up to you as to whether you even go to a lecture or not. I know plenty of people who did not attend a single lecture at LSE their entire 3 years and just watched the video recording. And they managed their time somehow. For me, I went to every lecture, and that's how I do it. So it's finding something that works for you.
Okay, thank you.
Arvind, we have the next question from Arularsi Praveen. So she's asking, can you provide guidance for kids choosing subjects in year 8 for future studies like GCSE or A-levels?
Oh God, that brings me back. What's that, 7 years? I did that. Pick the ones that you enjoy. Obviously, pick the ones that you enjoy. Don't be forced into doing something that you don't like simply because it might boost your career prospects or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you've got to do that lesson, 3 or 4 hours a week for the next 3 or 4 years. Yeah, pick the ones that you really enjoy, and I can't really say much more than that. Obviously, also just a tiny note is that if you can, if you can, take as many as you can, because if you have the time for it. So my personal situation, the school, so I chose what? French, history, business studies, extended projects, I think, as like my 4. But I also didn't want to give up German. So because of that, I asked the school if I could just take German, if I could get private tutoring for German outside of school, or whether they'd just provide me with the content and whether I could attend after school sessions. And they agreed to that. And so I ended up picking up a 5th GCSE that I wouldn't have otherwise, just through initiative. And again, if there are things that you think you might want to pick up that you don't want to drop, just see if you can maintain doing them outside of school as long as you can manage your workload.
Thank you. Any other children want to ask any questions? Right. I'm going to take another question from the chat. It's from Alan Busson. What's the best way to revise and get information in your mind without too much effort? They're almost asking you the shortcut.
I think it varies from person to person. Like, there are different types of learners. And so people learn in very, very different ways. There are visual learners, there are what's called audio learners and what have you. For me, it was reading the textbook. It was reading the textbook like page by page, going to like a certain point in the chapter. So like our chapters would be like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 up to 2, and then whatever. So I'd read from 1 to 1.1. Read the text. This is for like something like economics, where it's all theory, by the way. I'd read that chapter, and I've been blessed with a good memory, so I would just I'd then like almost try to recite the chapter by I'd write bullet points about everything that was covered, and make sure that I could recite them. So there might be like a bullet point list of 7 things, 7 factors that are mentioned, or like I'm trying to think of a good example here. Yeah, so if there are 7 factors that influence trade that you've got to remember, I would look at the page, try to remember the 7, note down the 7, or note down as many as I could, and then look at the ones that I missed, and then look at it again, then write it down again, and then that way it eventually sticks in your head. But at the same time, this is kind of very, very similar to like rote learning, but it's not, because you have to make sure that you understand the content as well. And then for other things like maths or English, I think it's just practice, honestly. It's practice, reviewing your work, by getting your teacher to review your work, and then implementing the changes over time, and you'll improve.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Arvind. I have an interesting question from the audience, somebody from guest. So, what can children do to encourage parents to not be pushy about marks and career choices? So you can answer from a child's perspective, though you're an adult.
What can parents do? What can children do to stop parents being pushy about their... that's a tough one. I think you've just got to... If your parent is dead focused on you doing a certain career, I think you've just got to hold your ground if it's not the one that you want to do yourself. Explain your motivations behind why you want to do something. So if your parents are pushing you to do medicine and you want to do economics, explain why you think you'll enjoy it more. Explain your entire reasoning. You've got to really convince them at the end of the day. And eventually I hope that they'll support your decision. When it comes to marks, ideally you want to be in a position where they don't question it, as in you get as close to, if you perform well, they'll never question it anyway. If not, I think you just got to reassure them that everything's okay. Like if you perform consistently and you have a one-off, bad performance, then you just say it's a one-off bad performance and make sure that it is a one-off bad performance by doing well in the next test. And there's no cause for concern. And you've also, again, you've got to emphasize that it's about you. So if your parents are starting to compare you to like your friends, saying, oh, why do you only come second or third in the class? That's their problem. Don't take it in your stride. I think you just got to kind of ignore that.
Thank you, Arvind. I think that's a little word of caution for the parents. I think there's plenty of really nice questions in the chat, but it's coming around 5 o'clock now. So what I thought was, if Arvind is okay, can you share your email details in the chat for people to get in touch with you? Some of these questions are really personal, about asking how to choose certain subjects in GCSE and how to, tips and tricks and things like that. So to take that further.
Sorry, Aarti, I think we have some more questions from children, I think.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, yes, yeah, please go ahead, children. Please unmute yourself.
Like Siva and Daniel, Gilbert, there are some hands are raised,
I'm so sorry, I can't see that. So yes, please, Siva, go ahead. And whoever wants to, please unmute yourself.
I think we got one from, is it Siva? I see Gilbert Uncle's got a question.
Thank you, Arvind. The talk was really useful, so congratulations. On a second note, especially like GCSEs, A-levels can be stressful time. How did you maintain your physical health? Because it's an underrated part of examination, in my opinion. So
I played basketball all the time because for me, my personal circumstances was that I had an hour a day to waiting between the end of school and getting picked up, for my car share going back to Leicester. So in that hour period, I was almost always playing, playing basketball for the most part. I honestly played basketball religiously. Like I played before school, at break time, at lunchtime, after school. So those sort of even 15 or 20 minute periods of physical activity meant that you were relaxed and motivated to then continue on with your next set of work. So that's what worked for me.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Arvind. I think we next have Roshan, who wants to ask you a question. Are you ready, Roshan?
Okay. Thanks, Arvind, for this useful talk. What I want to know is, how old were you when you chose your career path?
Okay, so I pretty much narrowed it down to finance by year 11. I narrowed it down to finance by year 11, and in terms of degree, I'd narrowed it down to economics by year 12. So that was the case for me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got another interesting question from the audience here, Arvind. So how do you react to failures? Can you quote with an example, please?
Okay, so for me, a failure would be like, as I said, I didn't get into Oxford. So I got my Oxford rejection January the 9th. I got it around like in the morning. I was upset from like the school day. As soon as I got back home from school, I started revising again, or I started working, because I was like, for me, it just fueled me to work even harder. And it just fueled me because, some of my friends had got in, and it was great that they got in, but I wanted to still, I don't know, this might be the wrong mindset, but for me, I kind of wanted to prove that I was still on, I'm a very competitive person. So I wanted to make sure that I did as well as I possibly could academically, almost to, just to reconfirm my own self-worth, as it were. So I worked hard, watched a couple of motivational videos, and worked hard the rest of the night. So that's for me. I think use failure as a fuel to motivate you, or at least that's what I try to do.
Thank you.
think we've
Any
got,
more children at home? Rohan, Daniel?
I think we got one from Rohan.
Hi, Alvin. Your talk is really nice. This is my question. In your primary school days, what was your daily routine like? How long did you study? And
When I was in primary school, I'd wake up. I'd obviously just wake up, and whilst Appa was and do my my normal things, and whilst Appa was in the shower waiting to drop me off to school, I'd learn touch typing. So I think there's still a website. I think it's called Dance Mat Typing, and that's how I learned to touch type. So I'd spend my mornings, at 7:40, 8 o'clock in the morning, doing touch typing. And then I'd obviously spend my school day as normal, doing normal school stuff. And then once we got home, normally it was it was honestly mostly extracurricular activities. At primary school, just do as many extracurricular activities and find one that you really enjoy. So I was doing karate, swimming, football, basketball, all sorts of different things. And then I used to go to tuition a little bit, and I'd also spend, if I had any schoolwork, I'd get it done immediately, because then it was just out of my head, and I could spend it was one less thing to worry about.
Good, thank you. Any other children want to ask questions?
Did Daniel raise his hand earlier?
I think he might have. Daniel, did you have a question?
Oh, you need to unmute yourself, Daniel.
Daniel, unmute yourself.
Daniel, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
unmute, you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so what's your opinion on the education system? Because they don't, in my opinion, I believe in like self-help and self-development. So like, do you think they should change the education system or keep it as the same?
Oh,
I personally didn't have a education system. Like, if you want to focus on your own self-development, then you can do that in addition to the education system. I don't agree with the recent things that have been happening in terms of GCSEs and A-level results, but apart from that, during normal times, especially at a grammar school, I didn't have any problems with the way my education was. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Arvind.
Okay.
Arvind, one more question from the audience.
Yeah.
So how did you manage to keep yourself away from other distractions, and how do you stay focused?
For me, I value my kind of long-term outlook, achieving my long-term goals more than my short-term enjoyment. So for me, I'm kind of willing to sacrifice a little bit of short-term, in the moment happiness by watching a TV show or going, going out with friends for the kind of happiness I get from performing well at school. For me, I know that when I perform well in a test, or get 100 out of 100 in the test, or have performed well in in a certain subject, that kind of pride of achievement and happiness you get from getting that achievement, I find is more valuable to me than the short-term happiness I have from watching TV or just relaxing. So that's what really drives me, because I know in the long term I'll be happier. And that's what really drives me.
Super. Thank you, Arvind. That was so useful. I think Rahul's got a question next. Are you ready, Rahul?
Yeah, my question is do you think tuition is necessary, and what year did you start? And I have another question, which is, when did you start revising for your GCSEs?
Is tuition necessary? I personally think it's, in most cases, yeah, as in, even if it's a matter of what you want to do, right? You can be at the top of your class, but if you still want to improve yourself and further your development, then yeah, go for it. Tuition's the way to go. Like, in primary school, I was probably one of the better performing individuals in English. Yeah, I still went to English tuition so that I could further my skills even more. Because it's not about just the classroom, but it's just about, yourself. Think about it. You could be the best performing person in your classroom, but there could be, hundreds, thousands of individuals out there who are still better at English than you. And it's not that it's a competition. It's just that you want to push yourself and push yourself and further yourself as much as you can. And tuition is just a way for you to do that. And when you become miles and miles ahead of the class, I've noticed that it provides you with a degree of self-confidence in yourself. Your confidence in your ability to translate to other parts of your life. So yeah, I would personally recommend tuition, although you don't necessarily need heaps in terms of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We'll take one last question. It's from Gilbert Raja. He's from Rugby. He's got his hands up.
Hello, Arvind. It was a very nice presentation. Nice to see you growing up. Now, I just want to say a few words about Arvind because Arvind வந்து எனக்கு சின்ன வயசுல இருந்து ரொம்ப நல்லா தெரியும். When he started Largan Sharif, அவன் வந்து ஃபர்ஸ்ட் அவன் ஜாயின் பண்ணதுக்கப்புறம் எங்கள் வீட்டில் வந்து அவன் வந்து சாயங்காலத்தில் வருவான், எப்பயுமே டெய்லி வருவான், வந்து எங்க கூட கொஞ்சம் ஸ்டே பண்ணுவான். ஹவ் ஃபோக்கஸ்ட் இன் ஹீஸ், அதான் நான் அதை சொல்கிறது தான் லைக் பண்ணுறேன். அவன் வந்தானா ஸ்கூல்லேருந்து வந்த உடனே பேக்கை வந்து வச்ச உடனே ஆண்டி அங்கிள் எங்கிட்ட எதாவது கேட்பானா, ஒரு ஜூஸ் கேட்பான், இல்லை ஏதாவது ஒரு ஸ்நாக்ஸ் கேட்பான். கேட்டுட்டு ஃபஸ்ட்டு பார்த்தீங்கன்னா உட்காந்து அவனுக்கு இருக்கிற ஹோம்ஒர்க் எல்லாம் பண்ணிட்டு தான் என் பொண்ணு வந்து பக்கத்தில் இருந்தால் கூட அவள்கிட்ட கூட பேச மாட்டான். he just come from the school, ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஏதாவது ஸ்நாக்ஸ் சாப்பிடுவான், சாப்பிட்ட உடனே அவனோட ஹோம்ஒர்க் எல்லாம் எடுத்து புக் எடுத்து ஹவு டெடிகேட்டட் அவன் அவ்வளோ ஒரு ஃபோக்கஸாக அதை உட்காந்து அதை படிப்பான். படிச்சுட்டு எல்லாத்தையும் அவன் வந்து அன்னைக்கு பண்ணுற ஹோம்ஒர்க் எல்லாம் அவங்க டாடி 7 மணிக்கு வருவார், அதுக்குள்ளே அவன் 4 மணிலேருந்து அவன் 6 மணிக்குள்ளே எல்லா ஹோம்ஒர்க்கையும் ஃபினிஷ் பண்ணிட்டு அப்புறம் பாஸ்டி நாட்டையும் வந்து கேபிக்கிட்டையும் ஹலோ பாஸ்தி அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவான். அது வரைக்கும் அவன் வந்து பேச மாட்டான். அவ்வளோ ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு பையன், அவ்வளோ ஒரு டெடிக்கேட்டடா. அவனுக்கு அப்பயிலே வந்து படிப்பு அப்படின்னா அது மேலே அவ்வளோ ஒரு ஆர்வம். அது வந்து எல்லாருக்குமே அது ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு மோட்டிவேஷன். அது வந்து நான் வந்து பாஸ்டின் நிறைய தடவை அவள்கிட்ட வந்து சொல்லுவேன், அங்கே பாரு அரவிந்தனை எப்படி இருக்காங்க பாரு, அரவிந்தனை எவ்வளோ ஃபோக்கஸாக படிக்கிறேன். ஏன்னா இப்போ இந்த நம்ம பிள்ளைங்களாம் வந்துச்சுன்னா வந்த உடனே வந்து டிவி இதான் எடுக்கும், டிவி எடுக்கும், ரிமோட் எடுக்கும், இல்லை ஃபோன் எடுக்கும், இல்லை அவன் அப்படி அந்த மாதிரி நான் அவனை ஒரு நாள் கூட நான் வந்து பார்த்ததே கிடையாது. அவன் வந்தானா அவன் எடுக்கிற முதல் இது அவனோட நோட் புக்காக தான் இருக்கும். வீட்டுக்கு வந்தோன்னா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் அதை எடுப்பான், எடுத்து எல்லா ஹோம்ஒர்க்கு பண்ணிட்டு ப்ளே பண்ணுவான், நல்லா ப்ளே பண்ணுவான், நல்லா கார்டனில் போய் வந்து ஜாலியாக விளையாடுவான். ஆனால் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் அவனோட வேலையை வந்து படிப்பை முடிச்சுட்டு தான் பண்ணுவான். ஐ விஷ் ஹிம் ஆல் வெரி சக்ஸஸ். ஐ ஹோப் என்னோட ஒரு ப்ரேயர் வந்து அவன் என்னைக்காவது ஒரு நாளைக்கு ஒரு சான்ஸ் இருந்தா ஒரு பேங்க் ஆஃப் ஒரு பேங்க் ஆஃப் இங்கிலாந்துக்கு ஒரு கவர்னரா வந்தா கூட ஐ வுட் பி வெரி சர்ப்ரைஸ். ஆமா, அவ்வளவு ஒரு டெடிகேட்டட் பர்சன். I wish him all the success. Great guy. Keep going, man. Love you.
Thank you, uncle.
Amazing words. Thank you, Gilbert, for sharing your personal experience. As they say, there's no elevators to success, isn't it? You just have to get on the stairs.
Definitely.
Right. Arvind, from a boy next door to a friendly neighborhood superhero. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and explaining how it all came together and how you have progressed in your life. He's a role model to most of our boys and of course our girls too. He's an all-rounder, not just studies, but many aspects. And he's said how to become a successful student. And I'm sure all the parents were furiously taking notes, and hopefully some of the children were taking notes too. So thank you to AI instructor and Mr. Kavi Arasan for organizing these series. I'm pleased to announce that this is the beginning of a web series, which is going to be here every single week at 4 p.m. So tune in every week for a series of meetings and webinars. It's about technology. It's going to cater to various people's appetites, and it's for adults and children. So you won't be disappointed. Please tune in. And I'm going to start with or end with a finishing quote from Mark Twain. only in the dictionary is there a place for success, where success comes before hard work. Okay, so thank you everybody who tuned in, and thank you AI instructors for this amazing evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.